Well, good morning. We should be live, or good afternoon, I guess, to most of you watching this. My name is James Wood, one of the editors at the Legal 500, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today, The Shift to Digital, E-Commerce in the New Normal. As I guess many of you are noticing with the ongoing pandemic, more and more people are shopping online, so very pleased to say we have an exceptional cast of speakers to talk us through this, particularly interested to hear the thoughts of Lazada and Paymongo later. But we will also be hearing from the partners and lawyers at Cruz Marcello and Tenafrancia. And Cruz Marcello Tenafrancia, one of the leading firms in Southeast Asia, certainly the leading firm in the Philippines. A great pleasure for us to be working with their lawyers. I will pass over in a second to Patricia Bunye, who I'm sure everyone knows is a senior partner in the firm. She's in the intellectual property department, but Patricia also heads the mining and natural resources practices, so covers a lot of ground and also something of an expert on e-commerce. So greatly looking forward to hearing her views and the other lawyers. Just a brief word on housekeeping from me. Obviously, we will be hearing from our panel of expert speakers today, getting their views, but we also want to hear your views in the audience. So any questions you may have, any comments, anything you'd like to see us discuss or that you feel we haven't covered, please let us know. Use the Q&A function on Zoom. I'll be monitoring the questions and we'll try to get through as many of them as possible when we have an opportunity to do so. Okay, so with that, I will pass over to Patricia and she will introduce the speakers as and when they are due to speak. Patricia, please.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon from Manila. I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar that we are jointly hosting with the Legal 500. And it is our honor to host this entitled The Shift to Digital E-Commerce in the New Normal. This is the third time that we are collaborating with the Legal 500. The first was in a roundtable discussion in 2018 on the changing role of in-house counsel, while the second was at the Legal 500 GC Summit in 2019, where our firm presented a panel on energy security in Southeast Asia. Today's topic is even more timely. As the pandemic has forced us to rethink the way we do business, companies have had to accelerate the shift to digital. Although the internet economy has already been rapidly evolving in the last decade, the fact that most transactions now have to be done online, particularly during the pandemic, has made digital transformation fundamental for the survival of most companies. The benefits of this transformation are clear. Not only are companies able to improve or optimize business processes, they are also able to open new sources of revenue and ensure the resilience of their organizations. However, this transformation also brings top to bottom challenges throughout the organization and raises a range of legal, operational, and even ethical issues. We have three eminent speakers today to walk us through these issues. And before I introduce them, I would like to remind the audience that you can type in your questions in the Q&A box that you find below so that we can collate and ask them during the open forum that follows. Please indicate to whom you are addressing your questions. Should there be any pressing questions that cannot wait for the Q&A, I will raise them as appropriate. Otherwise, we will save the questions for the end. Meanwhile, we request that you keep your microphones on mute so as not to disrupt the presentations. I will now begin with the introduction of our first speaker, Attorney Edwin Lacerda, who is well known to most of you. Edwin is a lawyer and fintech entrepreneur. He is co-founder and chief operating officer of Manila-based fintech startup Paymongo, the first Philippine fintech company funded by Y Combinator, an American seed money startup accelerator that helped launch Stripe, Airbnb, and Dropbox, among others. Aspiring to make online payment fast and simple, Paymongo is a payment processing platform that allows businesses in the Philippines accept online payments of all types, including credit cards, bank deposits, electronic wallets, and cash. Prior to his foray into the fintech industry, Edwin served as a cabinet member during the administration of President Benigno S. Aquino III from 2010 to 2016 in his capacity as the presidential spokesperson, participating in policy discussions and creating strategic communications for the president and other members of the cabinet. He has years of experience in corporate law and litigation. He also taught subjects including constitutional law at the Far Eastern University Institute of Law and the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila, or the University of the City of Manila. He obtained his Bachelor of Laws degree from the Ateneo de Manila University School of Law in 1989. I heard that the name PayMongo is derived from a mongo seed, which starts small like an SME, but grows into something that catches the eye of Y Combinator, which is a story we are all eager to hear about. So Edwin, we are all yours.
Good afternoon. It's the first time I've been since a long while ago to speak to a company of lawyers. Ever since, I must admit that ever since 2010, I have not practiced law. So it's been it's a good feeling to be in a company of lawyers, despite the number of jokes about lawyers. But let me share to you our journey as a fintech startup. We'd like to thank Patricia. We'd like to thank Susan and Legal 500 for giving us the opportunity to present the journey of PayMongo. It's a payment platform that started last year, June of last year. Let me share the story. Let me share my screen. Oh, I think I'm disabled, James. I can't share my screen.
Sorry, follow the first hurdle. 1 second. Enable you. There you go. You should be able to do it now. Apologies for that.
Okay. So PayMongo, we call ourselves a future. We would like to pride ourselves as the future of payments. We're called PayMongo. We started, as what Patricia said, we derive our name from the small seed Mongo. We felt that there's such a huge opportunity for a Filipino fintech startup to start the online payment sphere in the Philippine landscape. Let me show to you our journey. Just for a macro perspective, the Philippines in 2015, the total internet users in the Philippines was 55 million. It has grown to 68 million. By the way, this is based on the Google Temasek report of 2019 on the e-economy of Southeast Asia. In 2015, the Philippine internet economy was about 8 billion. In 2025, it's projected to grow as high as 25 billion, divided into 4 pillars: e-commerce, online travel, online media, and ride hailing. So there's such a huge opportunity for growth. Currently, I believe the Philippine internet economy contributes to about 2.1% of the Philippine GDP. So why did we decide to go through and come up with an online payment platform? I think for most of us, prior to the online payment platform, the enterprise, the legacy payment providers would only cater to the big merchants, those who have huge businesses. So they've catered mostly to big corporations. And so the small, medium, and merchants do not have the facility to provide online payments. And normally, what we've seen in the past few years was that if someone was selling on Facebook, for instance, these are the normal pain points. The seller would send to a buyer his account details by way of text, and the buyer would go to send a bank account, and the buyer would line up to the bank. And since most Filipinos are unbanked, they'd go to the bank, fill up the deposit slip, lines up, and pays the amount. And then after payment, what they normally do was to take a screenshot of the deposit slip, and then buyer then sends a screenshot of the deposit slip to the online seller, either by text or email. And then there's a consummation of the sale. In this whole process, it would take around charitably 30 minutes to an hour, and depends on how long the line is in the bank. So this is a real pain point, and we've experienced this actually previously. And so we were walking down BGC, and we felt, why not come up with a solution to this whole painful process of paying for those small and medium enterprises. So we decided to come up with a online payment platform. To be perfectly honest with you, we looked at this various models, and we came up with the model of Stripe. And we came up with a solution of providing payment for similar to Stripe. So we applied to Y Combinator. As Patricia said, Y Combinator is a Silicon Valley seed startup accelerator. What we did was to file an application a week before the deadline, and we just we told ourselves, why don't we try applying for funding from Y Combinator? And so we filed an application. The one who interviewed us online was a guy named Tim Brady. Tim Brady is the first Yahoo employee, and so we proposed this was an online interview, and we convinced him about the feasibility of setting up an online payments platform in the Philippines. And we applied first. When we applied, we got accepted, and we were asked to go to Mountain View in Silicon Valley for the final interview. In the final interview, there were 4 panelists from Y Combinator, and they asked us a series of questions. And at 10 in the evening of that day, we were told that we were accepted. It was such a joy for us, knowing that we were the first local Filipino fintech startup to be accepted by Y Combinator. Just to show how difficult it is to get accepted to Y Combinator, they have 2 batch programs every year, a summer and a winter program. And for every program, there are about 12,000 startup applications from all over the world. And they say that it's more difficult to get into Y Combinator than getting into Harvard or Stanford. I don't know if some of you who are graduates of Stanford and Harvard might disagree, but that's the data they've compiled. So out of the 12,000 batches applications that were reviewed by Y Combinator, we were only one of 200 startups, mostly from the US, from India, two from Indonesia, and only one from the Philippines. So we were the first Philippine-based fintech startup that got accepted. There were 4 of us, 4 co-founders. On the left is Francis. Francis Plaza is a graduate of MIT. And then on my, here, this is Lucia, and then Jaime. I'm the most senior. I'm over 50 years old, and the rest are they're all below 30 years old. We were friends from a long time ago. And so we decided, Francis is a software engineer. Jaime, on the extreme right, is also a software engineer. Luis is a UP graduate, an entrepreneur, and I, as Patrice mentioned, is a tech entrepreneur. So we decided, and it was a 3-month program where we had a weekly meeting with Y Combinator. There were mentors teaching us. One of the things that we learned while we were developing the product, one of the meetings, they said, "How's your product coming along?" And we said, "Oh, it's there. It's not perfect yet." And one of their mentors told us, "Don't wait for it to be perfect. Just launch it." And I was reminded, when I was still in government, President Aquino would always tell us that perfect is the enemy of good. And so it resonated with us. Launch a product, then and only then will you see whether your product is good. So in June, while we were still in Y Combinator, we launched a product here in the Philippines online, and we got 10 merchants. So it was a period of testing the product. How nimble was it? How was the user experience? Were there any clunkiness in the platform? All of that we were doing while we were in Y Combinator. And at the same time, we were also Y Combinator, as what Patricia described, is an incubator. It incubates startups and helps them grow. At the same time, part of the being in Y Combinator is that at the end of the program, we were supposed to have a demo day where Y Combinator would gather around 1,000 venture capital firms from all over the US. So you would see the size of Sequoia Capital to as many as those angel investors. So in August, all of 200 startup firms from Y Combinator presented to over 1,000 venture capital firms, and we did a presentation in one of the empty piers of San Francisco. So all of us were there presented, and from there we were able to secure $2.7 million in investment. And these are some of our strategic partners: Y Combinator, Stripe, a payments processor. It's famous in the US. They process Amazon and Walmart. I think one of every two online payments is being processed by Stripe. Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal and the first investor of Facebook, as well as the co-founder of Tinder, also invested with us. And also the owner of Sacramento Kings also invested with us. And locally, I'd like to, and I have his permission to disclose this. Locally, we have the senior partner of Cruz Marcelo Tenefrancia, Nonong Cruz, who also saw our potential and also decided to invest with us in PayMongo. And here we are. We started promoting PayMongo both for international and domestic in TechCrunch, in CNN, in Tech in Asia, and others where were able to introduce what PayMongo was all about. We also had an opportunity to integrate and had a financial partnership with GCash and with several banks. Now, currently we have, these are some of our merchants: Beauty Manila, The Moment Group, Shakey's, Boss, Nike, and Sears. But let me just share you, while we have the fortune of being able to rope in enterprise merchants, the DNA really of PayMongo was to really, our mission is to increase the GDP of the Philippine internet economy. And how do we do that? We can only do that if we're able to bring in a lot of small and medium enterprise individuals who'd like to go online, small enterprises who do not have the facility to start a website. So the common foundational problem of online commerce is, how do I get paid? You might have a good product, you might have a good promotional materials, but at the end of the day, the online seller would have to ask himself, how do I get paid? And so we were there. We provided the facility of payment. We provided the payment solution. So it was an inflection point when COVID happened. We were there, and as you know, in the Philippines, it was we had a ECQ, or a total lockdown, where brick and mortars were forced to close shop. There were no business online, offline businesses. So the only way to obtain your food, the only way to obtain any goods would have to be by way of online commerce, with the exception of few essential services that were allowed to operate offline. Most of the transactions were going to be done online. We were there at the right spot, and a lot of the individuals who felt that they had an opportunity to do online businesses decided to go online, migrate online, and found PayMongo to be a perfect solution to how do they get paid without going out of the house, by way of online payments, by way of banks. We were able to allow them to receive and accept payments. And alongside that, some of these groups, companies mentioned here, also migrated with us during the COVID pandemic. So I will share to you the growth of PayMongo at the latter part. Currently, we are accepting what we do. Just to give an example, just to give an illustration, PayMongo is basically we aggregate payments, various payment methods in one platform. So we accept credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, and then we have GCash, Coins.ph, and then GrabPay, another e-wallet. And we also have over-the-counter like 7-Eleven and M. Louis. But unfortunately, during the COVID pandemic lockdown, they were not allowed to operate due to the fact that you're not allowed to go out of your residential premises. So a lot of these are our payment methods that we accept right now. Coming soon, we will have the various e-wallets, WeChat, Alipay. We hope to also integrate with PayMaya. And then we also hope to do direct online banking, Union Bank, BDO, and BPI. Just to describe what our products are, we have payment links or for one-time transactions. And for those who have e-commerce, we do e-commerce integration or our API integration. Payment links is a unique product where what we do is, this is, like we said, for a lot of small and medium merchants who don't have the facility or the capital to set up a website and do API integration. What we did was to come up with a product where you're allowed to do business with an online seller, providing a payment link to the buyer. So what we did was to come up with a simple process of sending the online seller sending a link to a buyer. If you're, for instance, a Facebook seller, you're an Instagram seller, you don't have any website, you can still accept payments by using PayMongo links, where by signing up to the platform, you're able to create a link, and then you use that payment link to send it to your online buyer. There are two easy steps to do it. First, from the platform itself, you will fill up a form. Basically, what you will do is you input the payment amount. You want to come up with any description. If, for instance, Patricia is selling a pair of shoes, she can type in pair of shoes for so-and-so, and then write the amount, and then send that link over to the buyer. And then the buyer gets the payment link, and he will see the link. And from the customer perspective, he can select the payment method. He provides, for instance, if he's choosing credit cards, he can choose to type in the billing details, review the summary, and complete payment. From here, this takes a matter of few seconds. Once you do this, you're immediately paid. And our payment platform also has a dashboard where the online merchant is able to see all the daily transactions of his business. You don't have to wait. Normally, what the previous payment providers would do would to send you a CSV file the next day of all the daily transactions that you received for the previous day. In our case, since you have a dashboard, you have a real-time transaction. You can see the real-time transactions. You can see in real time whether that particular transaction has been paid or not. And so on a daily basis, you would know a summary of your sales. And then on a daily basis, you'll be able to see on a monthly basis the total sales immediately. And you don't have to wait for your payment provider providing you a summary or a detailed transaction of the transactions the day before. That is for those of us who don't have, and most of us, by the way, most of the online sellers in the Philippines do not have the capacity to set up a website for integration. So a lot of our small and medium sellers are using PayMongo links, and it's been found to be very, very effective, very, very useful for a lot of these small merchants. We have, in fact, in that process, we're able to achieve our mission of increasing the GDP of the Philippine internet economy, allowing small and medium merchants to be able to onboard and allowing them to do business. So a lot of, in fact, anecdotally, a lot of those who were unemployed and who remains to be unemployed are able to now find business by setting up an online business, and also by allowing us to be their payment platform. We basically charge a flat fee. We don't have sign-up fees. We do not have subscription fees. So the way we have a very reasonable fee, lower than PayPal. And we have, for instance, online sellers who previously wanted to have the facility to offer a credit card payment method. Unfortunately, when you go directly to a bank, since you're a small merchant, they would charge you what we call a merchandise discount, MDR, or transaction fee of about 5 to 7% per transaction. In our case, we charge a default rate of 3.5%. But of course, based on your volume, we can negotiate the rates downwards. But that's how we made online payments, or rather credit card payments, more accessible to online buyers, and more accessible for online sellers to offer to their online buyers. It's also a way where since we've aggregated all the payment methods, the credit card transactions, debit card transactions, since all our ATMs in the Philippines are already a debit card, so they're also able to transact business online. And also we have our GCash and also GrabPay. They have a slew of payment options they can choose from and provides the ease for a online buyer to choose whatever payment method he prefers. Our second product is called the APIs. So if you have a website, the best way to do it is to connect to us by APIs. And here's where the problem with APIs are. payment providers are very, very secretive about their payment, the API documentation. That's for that reason, it takes someone, it takes a firm, an enterprise to integrate for about 2 weeks a month to integrate with the payment provider. Let me give you an example. When we were trying out, why do we explore the payment landscape in the Philippines, we signed up with a legacy provider. I won't mention the name of the legacy provider. We had to pay 30,000 pesos, a little over $500. And then we had to submit documents. When we submit the documents, physical documents, they lost the document once. So we had to submit the document again, our documents again. And when we saw the API documentation, the code was just so archaic. It was so difficult to integrate with it that it took us, all in all, a period of 3 months to integrate with the payment provider. We felt, so that's our pain point from the point of view of an online seller wanting to integrate with a payment provider. What we did in our case was we were able to, we decided to make public our API documentation. So when you sign up with us, again, you sign up with no fee. When you sign up with us, you're able to immediately see our API documentation. For developers, it's paradise for them because they can immediately see the API documentation, how easy it is or how difficult it is to integrate. In our case, I can for those who are interested, we integrate with the developers can integrate with us in a matter of 2 days. And the whole process would take you, together with sandbox testing, would take you, depending of course on the ability of your developers, would take around more or less a week to integrate. So it's that fast. In fact, we've done that with several of our clients that we've mentioned to you, the kind of clients that we have, the enterprise merchants who prefer to do API integration. So they were able to integrate that fast with us. So for instance, we have Kumu, one of the social platforms. We were able to integrate with them. So a lot of our integration is easy. What we do also, we provide a 24/7 customer service, and we form chat groups with our engineers and their engineers so that integration is as seamlessly as we can do it. So we've got positive reviews on our API documentation. We continually put out our API documentation as we come out with new products. We also have e-commerce platform plugins for those who are interested. We have Shopify, WooCommerce, and Magento, where depending on your preference, we have these plugins where you can immediately link up with, integrate with our API payment platforms. So again, as I mentioned, one of the features of our PayMongo platform is that you are provided a dashboard where you're able to keep track of all the payments and to manage and the growth of your business. So this is on a daily basis. We have our payouts are also are very, very seamless. You can do also refunds on your own. Our platform allows you to do refunds on your own. You don't have to inform us. You can do it on your own. And so this is as simple as it gets. How do you sign up to PayMongo? Just go to paymongo.com. You just sign up. You complete an eKYC process. It's interesting, just to let you know, we do eKYC. Everything is done online. If you're a corporation, we would ask for your articles of incorporation. If you're a partnership, articles of partnership. If you are a single proprietorship, we ask for your Department of Trade and Industry registration. And if you are an individual, we will just ask for your government ID. Everything is done online. We do a KYC process. It's required from us because we are also registered we are a registered payment provider operating system from Banco Central. Cruz Marcelo and Francia help us in securing our license from the BSP. And since we're regulated by the Banco Central, we have a robust eKYC process. In fact, and also part of this requirement is necessary for us because we also partner with our acquiring bank, which also requires us to have a robust and stringent KYC process. So what we do is everything is done online. We verify you, we verify your digital footprint. Where do you do commerce? We see if without bad actors from the very start. and then we make sure that you intend to legitimately transact business online. We have done a walkthrough for several of our bank financial partners. In fact, we've done a walkthrough with Visa and Mastercard. They were very, very interested. How is it that you're able to onboard merchants so quickly, in spite of the fact you do everything by KYC? It's not just taking a picture and showing your ID. It's not as simple as that. We do a very stringent process of KYC, but yet we can onboard a merchant in 3 to 7 days. And for that speed, we were asked by Visa and Mastercard. They were very curious to ask us, and so we did a walkthrough with them. In fact, at the end of the walkthrough with Visa asked us, are you able to, can you offer your eKYC process as a product itself? And we said, not at this moment. We still have to do a lot of automation on that part. But yes, we intend to sell our eKYC onboarding process as a product at some future time. But it's something that we're trying to continuously try to improve, making everything as seamless, as online as possible, taking away all of the pain points that we've experienced when we were setting up and signing up with a payment provider. And then once you get activated by our compliance team, you can immediately accept payments. This is basically what we were pre-pandemic, pre-COVID. But during the COVID, what happened was there was a huge migration online, and so there were a lot of applications. So this part of getting activated in less than a day has now become at least 3 to 7 days because of the huge amount of applications. But nonetheless, we continue to be able to onboard a lot of merchants, and applicants continue to grow. Despite the fact that we are 1 year old, also the banks and the Visa and Mastercard were also curious to see if we were able to weed out bad actors during transactions. We are, by the way, a PCI DSS level 1 compliant. It's a standard requirement from the card industry. So we've obtained the highest level of compliance, level 1. So we are certified. And what we do, we also have a fraud software which are able to, based on 16,000 data points, we are able to sift and without bad merchants. We're able to see, based from the data points, such as your IP address, where you are, your cards, to be able to see whether it's a stolen card, whether it's a fraudulent transaction, whether you're using it for some other methods. Schemes, Visa and Mastercard have a long list of legitimate activities and restricted activities. We're able to see that, and we're able to funnel out during our KYC process, and also during our while you are transacting, based on our fraud engine, able to weed out a lot of bad actors, to such a point that, and if you're coming from the bank, maybe the BSP is aware of this, but we've got such a low, the dispute rate, a standard for the dispute rate should be 1%. Beyond that, the schemes, Visa and Mastercard would take you out and would deactivate you. Our dispute rate right now is 0.01%. So it's very, very low because of our fraud engine and because of our KYC process. So that gives confidence also to our merchants, to our buyers, to the buyers of the merchants, about the security and safety of PayMongo. A lot of the trust and confidence on online wasn't due to us, by the way. It was due to early movers like Lazada, who trained a lot of our Filipino consumers to go online. We were beneficiaries also of the trust that Lazada was able to engender from Filipinos. But over and above that, because of the COVID pandemic, Filipinos were forced also to rely on online commerce, and we provided a more secure way of telling them that when you transact business with PayMongo, you can be assured that our transactions are, your transactions are guaranteed, your transactions are safe. We're not saying we're 100%, but they're, like I said, our dispute rate is 0.01%. So we're able to weed out most, if not over 98% of transactions that go legitimately. Like I said, this is our total payment volume journey. Like I said, prior to the COVID pandemic, we were only processing about 40,000 in payments every month. Since the pandemic, we have now to date processed $3.1 million in payments. So every month we are growing our payments volume. This is not, by the way, our revenue, but this is the total payments volume that we are processing. And for that short period of time, we have processed so many the transactions. So we have now currently over 5,000 merchants online. We process more than 10,000 transactions on a regular basis. Even on a monthly basis, it's huge, more than 10,000 transactions. We are currently on our Series A fundraising. We're looking good on our Series A fundraising, and hopefully we'll be able to close that soon and make an announcement on our Series A fundraising. We have to turn down a number of venture capital firms. Interesting story. Let me tell you. A year ago, we were with Stripe, and like I said, Stripe was our main investor. A year ago, when we were at Stripe, before our final interview with Y Combinator, we visited the office of Stripe, and we were talking to the global investor there. We asked them, and he was an Indian American. We asked him, why aren't you investing in the Philippines? And his basic response was, we don't want to invest in the Philippines because, and I hope BSP and I think I saw a attendee here from Congress, and the investor officer from Stripe explained this. We don't invest in the Philippines because the Philippines was a black hole. And he explained further by saying that we're kind of not sure of your rules. So that's why we're not very keen on investing in the Philippines. That was in May of last year when we were going through the process of securing funding already from venture capital firms. When they heard that Peter Thiel invested with us, Stripe immediately decided to talk to us and said that we're interested in investing with you. And I asked that same guy who told me that the Philippines is a black hole, and I asked him, so why are you interested in investing with us? I thought we were a black hole. And he said, we're taking a chance with you. We want to see if you're able to prove your case. And if you do, then that is something that we could be able to see and look at the Philippines further as a future investment for us. So over this year, since June and up till now in August of 2020, we've proven our case. And so Stripe again has expressed an interest to invest with us. And I think they're taking more seriously the Philippines as a possible investment place for their payments processing also. But that's where we are. But on a legal perspective, it's difficult for us to grow this big without relying on a very capable law firm. We decided to not because Nonong was our investor, but I know the reputation of Cruz Marcel Francia precedes them, and so I felt that in order to be able to grow, we need to make sure that we are covered in terms of law. This payments is a highly regulated industry with the National Payment Systems Act enacted by Congress. We're now under the supervision of the central bank. Also because we handle financial transactions, while we are still not yet under the purview of the Anti-Money Laundering Council, we felt the need to also make ourselves be clothed with the necessary protection. So we've asked of law firm of Patricia and Nonong Cruz to help us in this regard. Right now, they're doing also our intellectual property. Just to also tell you some of the funny things, when we secured our funding and when our names came out in TechCrunch, in all the publications, suddenly we saw a mushrooming of people trying to register PayMongo on the internet. So that's why we needed to protect ourselves. That's why I felt that we needed very competent intellectual property lawyers like Patricia and Rowani and Susan to help us along. So right now they're also helping us in securing our intellectual property registration here in the Philippines. By and large, I think it's as we grow, we have a lot of opportunities for growth. Um, we are we're trying to secure more licenses from the Banco Central. We're going to apply for e-money license, for our remittance license. All this we need also help from very competent law firm like Cruz Marcelo Tenefrancia, and we're very very happy, by the way, with the services they've rendered. And this is and that's why we felt and when they asked us to do a presentation for this particular webinar, who can refuse? It's such a they've been such a big help for us in our journey towards contributing to the GDP of the Philippine internet economy. And without their help, we wouldn't be as confident in terms of our legal foundation, and as well as moving forward as we secure our future licenses. So thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you, Paymongo, and I hope if you have any questions later, I'll be more than glad to fill your queries. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the kind words, Edwin. And actually, there is already a question for you in the Q&A, and with the indulgence of our two other speakers, I could ask it already. The question is, how do online payment platforms comply with, it's specifically addressed to you, how do online payment platforms comply with BIR requirements for receipting and invoicing? Can online sellers use Paymongo documentation for their tax compliance?
Yes, yes, you can. Right now, currently, we are a service provider and the BIR. We are required to withhold 2% of our MDR. And we provide our receipts right now, we are not yet, we are applying for the BIR online receipting, but we do provide receipts. We're fully registered with the BIR. We are required to withhold, we are required to do withholding. And so we're fully compliant with BIR. We have by the way, our Chief Finance Officer, we just got him, is a CFO of GCash, previously the CFO of GCash. So our CFO is very well versed with BIR regulations. We're updated with BIR rules. And also, not to mention the fact that you are there to help us in our tax requirements. So that's why, yes, I can safely say that should you wish to transact with us, we are fully compliant with BIR regulations.
Okay, there are some other questions, but we will leave them for later. Thank you so much, Edwin. And now we go to our second speaker, Attorney Cyril Alfred S. Castro, or Chico for short. Chico is the head of government affairs of Lazada, now considered the top e-commerce platform in Southeast Asia with more than 50 million active buyers annually. Previously, he was the head of legal for retail of ING Bank NV Manila branch. In his capacity as the head of legal for retail, he supported the launch of the first all-digital bank offering in the Philippines, the ING Digital Bank app. Concurrently, he was also the data protection officer of the bank. Prior to joining ING, he was the head of legal of Lazada for 3 years. He graduated from the UP College of Law in 2008 and was admitted to the bar in 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Chico.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking the time this afternoon. It's a Friday, and you're taking the time as lawyers to listen to lawyers. Quite amazing. Thank you to the law firm of Cruz, Marcelo, and Tenefrancia for having me here. It's an honor to be presenting to my esteemed colleagues from the legal profession. It's an honor to be invited also by the Legal 500. I think this will be my first time to be speaking at the Legal 500 event. Thank you to Attorney Lasiarda for the kind words when he mentioned that Lazada paved the way for enabling trust in online, and I will talk more about that later on. To everyone who ordered on Lazada last 9/9, I hope you had good deals and your orders are on your way. Don't bug me though with regard to your orders. We have a help desk, which I will mention later. So I'll share my screen. And okay. There you go. I'll talk about e-commerce, innovating and adopting amid challenges. So this is a general outline of what I'm presenting to everyone. I'll present the mission and vision of Lazada and some key points of e-commerce that we believe in. I'll present background on what are the challenges that were encountered by Lazada. Lazada started back in 2012, backed by VC venture capital seed money from Rocket Internet. And what were the solutions that Lazada invested in and that Lazada continues to invest in? And I'll talk a bit about how Lazada responded to COVID, how Lazada responds to COVID up to now. And then I'll present a general overview of the Lazada business model. And then lastly, as also Attorney Laciarda said, we need people to trust the online sphere. So I'll talk about how we enable trust on Lazada. So I'll start off with the Lazada mission and vision. Lazada, first of all, is an entity that is in 6 countries in Southeast Asia, one of which is the Philippines. So our mission is to accelerate progress in Southeast Asia through commerce and technology. And our vision is to serve 300 million customers by 2030, create millions of jobs in the e-commerce ecosystem, which I will talk about more later on, and power real and profitable SMEs across the region. Now, these are the key points on e-commerce that we want you to take note of. Number one is MSMEs are the backbone of a vibrant and growing internet economy. Currently, there are 100,000 MSMEs on Lazada. This includes 200 who sell fresh and frozen, which we recently launched due to COVID. 95% of Lazada's business are from third-party sellers, majority of which are MSMEs. And the growth of MSME participation in platforms translates to job creation in other parts of the internet economy, the BPO industry, logistics, warehousing, and as Attorney Laciarda mentioned, with regard to the payment sphere. E-commerce platforms also enable MSMEs with tools, resources, and market access that only big businesses used to have. Through Lazada, MSMEs have marketing, nationwide marketing, value-added services, end-to-end. Lazada offers end-to-end services, logistics, payments, customer care, seller and buyer protection. So when an MSME onboards on Lazada, it doesn't need to think about how it's going to be paid or how the delivery is going to be done. Lazada enables ease of doing business through easy self-service onboarding and low entry and operating costs. So we want to make it as seamless and as frictionless as possible. The third point is that e-commerce platforms are highly beneficial to consumers in terms of assortment, price, convenience, protection. Because of the wide range of MSMEs and their products, primarily arising from ease of onboarding and low entry and operating costs. Right? There's a wide seller base, there's a wide assortment base. This encourages healthy competition, resulting in better service and lower prices for customers, consumers. You have access to assortment, competitive prices, value-added services, payments, logistics, customer care, seller, buyer protection, which are even more beneficial to consumers, especially during this pandemic. The last point is that the growth of the internet economy is a joint effort between private enterprise and government. Lazada has invested heavily and will continue to invest in the Philippine economy and the growth of MSMEs online. And so far, Lazada Philippines has accumulated 25 billion pesos in losses since 2012. I don't think there is any other entity in the Philippines willing to invest that much in losses since its inception. Lazada's parent company, Alibaba, has invested $4 billion into Southeast Asia. This was back in 2016 and continues up to the present. Lazada invested in a logistics infrastructure to better serve our MSMEs and customers, and currently operates 3 main warehouses and 100 hubs nationwide. So how does this work is that we put a logistical footprint so that it will be easier for our logistics partners to pick up the goods from our merchants, and also for our logistics partners to deliver the goods, the last mile delivery. In response to COVID, Lazada earmarked a 100 million peso bounce back program to help about 7,000 MSMEs. And we raised 25 million pesos in digital donations in partnership with 25 NGOs. So in addition to driving MSME participation and customer trust, growing the internet economy entails addressing the following policies that encourage growth: government infrastructure, internet connectivity, logistics, and payments. Now, I'll tell you a story about two sellers on Lazada. One is Zupa Fresh. We just launched our fresh section of Lazada. Zupa Fresh increased 2.3x in sales since onboarding last May. And then we have Sandals, which experienced 4x increase in sales. Right? So this exemplifies our vision of powering real and profitable MSMEs across the region. Now, as Attorney Lasiarda said, e-commerce is growing rapidly in Southeast Asia. I think our numbers are different. His is 36%, mine is 39%. That's a 3% differential of compound annual growth rate. And the Philippines is quite quickly adopting e-commerce, right? Out of 71 million active internet users, 70% are online shoppers. What were the challenges and solutions that Lazada faced and provided when it first set up shop in the Philippines? Well, number one is with regard to payment. Online before, you needed a credit card. So there's less number of people who had credit cards, access to credit cards. Right? And with regard to logistics, there's a challenge with regard to 7,000, I think it's 7,500, about 500 islands right now. So to provide that kind of delivery on time, that was a challenge that Lazada faced. And with regard to quality, there was a reluctance on consumers to purchase online. Right? So what were the solutions that Lazada offered and continue to invest on up to this day? Now, with regard to payment, we enabled cash and delivery. Without cash and delivery, there would be no e-commerce in the Philippines. And then we have secure and seamless payment options such as e-wallet, credit card, debit card. Like PayMongo, we are also PCI DSS compliant. So these are just some of the wide array of payment solutions offered to consumers. We are also verified by ISO IEC 27001. So that takes care of your information security concerns. With regard to logistics, as I stated earlier, we invested in our footprint to ensure that goods are delivered to the consumers, and that to ensure that the sellers that sell them, after their pick and packed items, we get the parcels from them and then take them to our sortation center. With regard to quality, to ensure quality, consumer satisfaction is a primary concern on Lazada. And I think the online sphere was the first sphere that offered easy returns for customers, unlike the brick and mortar where you had to go through hoops when you want to return an item. On Lazada, on other platforms, Zalora, Shopee, you can return an item and it's free, right? So I'll share a bit regarding COVID response. We're still in the midst of the pandemic, and this shows how we adopted, how the platforms can help MSMEs, and how the platform has adapted to our consumer needs. So we pivoted our platform to help the community bounce back. We used technology to elevate the online experience. We adapted to evolving consumers' needs, such as during the first phase of the ECQ, when essentials were the only ones being allowed to be sold. And we empowered businesses to onboard and grow, just as I showed earlier, right? So at the first phase of the quarantine, we pivoted our platform to prioritize essentials. So that entailed a lot of work on the tech side, closing down categories and everything. So I don't know if you can imagine what kind of stuff you have to do that. And then Lazada, Lazmart continued operations during ECQ so that we can provide groceries, alcohol, the essential products identified by the DTI. Now, during COVID also, because a lot of businesses were shuttered, they weren't able to operate. We ramped up MSME onboarding during COVID. So there was 3x daily onboarded sellers versus pre-COVID. So as I said earlier, we adapted to consumers' needs. They needed fresh, they needed meat, they needed seafood, and all of these kinds of products. They were staying in their houses. They needed essential products. So we enabled sellers of fresh and frozen food. There's a challenge in the Philippines with regard to our logistical infrastructure and dealing with cold storage. So how did we enable this? We enabled this by having the sellers themselves deliver the items themselves. Now, with regard to helping our MSMEs, we had our Bonds Back Together funding, 100 million pesos in funds and programs to assist 7,000 sellers. Right? And then we ran 3 bounce back campaigns for these sellers. May 5, June 6, then our July 15 biggest bounce back sale, so that they could recover when they were not operating their businesses. Right? We also enabled digital donations for COVID through our Lazada for Good program. So 25 million pesos were raised from 25 NGOs. Kaya Natin, Caritas, Philippine Red Cross, donations of PPEs, all of these kinds of items. You can donate by buying a voucher on Lazada. I'll talk a bit about Lazada's business model. I'll just run through things. So we're a platform. We don't own the means of production. We create the means of connection. So this is from Applico Inc. In the 21st century, the supply chain is no longer the central aggregator of business value, but the company owns matters less than what it can connect. A few examples of platforms. I think the favorite of everyone will be Facebook. And then these are the 4 functions of platform: providing tools and services, as I mentioned earlier. Audience building. You can have access to all the consumers in the Philippines. Matchmaking. Then we also have our rules and standards. That's how we enable trust. So Lazada's platform empowers MSMEs, right? Audience building, fast and easy onboarding, matchmaking. Everyone's Lazada app will be different from each other. Depends on. So if you compare how your app looks from the next person, that will be different. Yeah, we offer tools and services to our MSMEs and also to our customers through chat, business advisor, promo tools. Then of course we have our internal governance mechanisms, rules and standards, seller ratings, the intellectual property portal, which I will explain more later. Things like seller penalty point system, which we do through AI. So I can run through this quickly. We operate a marketplace platform model that connects sellers and customers. So we also have a retail model, limited, but that's a small percentage of our business. So we use 2 basic logistics models. One is that fulfilled by sellers, so the items are picked up from the sellers or the sellers drop them off at select drop-off points, or fulfilled by Lazada, wherein they are stored in the Lazada's warehouse. And then our first mile delivery will get the items, and then you'll go to your friendly neighborhood courier. I hope they're friendly when they deliver your 99 items. So in addition to sellers and customers, Lazada's platform also integrates payments and logistics. Right? So that's our ecosystem: sellers, customers, payment providers, logistics providers. We collect the payments from the sellers, from the customers, and then remit them to the sellers on a weekly basis. So the sellers don't have to think about when will they get paid. They get paid on a weekly basis. And this is done digitally. We incur operations costs on logistics and payments. We are passed through with regard to payment costs. And we charge the sellers the following fees: commission, payments, logistics. On this, Lazada remits to the government VAT and business taxes. Majority of our sellers, though, are not charged any commissions. So let's now talk to how we enable trust on Lazada, right? Lazada has invested heavily to build trust on the online sphere. As I said earlier, thank you to Attorney Laciarda for sharing those kind words. So we invested in our logistics and payments capabilities, in our help desk, in putting our customer care, our BPOs. We have a policy framework, a strong policies to enable trust. We have our intellectual property platform, which I will share about later on. And then we have a robust artificial intelligence technology, which I will share later on too. So we have a help desk. So we have a help desk. We provide answers to FAQs on various topics. Examples are the most common question that our customer service gets is, where is my item? Even if the item is still within the delivery time frame. So I think most e-commerce platforms deal with that. Where is my item? Customers may reach Lazada through many channels. We have chat, email, with a chat with Lazada peers team, with Lazada community and Facebook. Some contact me through LinkedIn. Sorry. And then, of course, we also enable Lazada seller and product transparency. How does this work? So we enable the customers to assess the seller quality through these metrics: seller rating, ships on time, chat response rate. So, example, for this kind of seller, he's a very good seller, right? So 96% seller rating, ship on time, 94%, chat response rate, 95%. So the better a seller performs on the platform, so the better their sales will grow, right? So we also enable our customers to assess the product quality through ratings and reviews. You can take a picture, you can put in how you felt about the item so that other customers can also check. Right? And this also ensures the behavior of sellers, that if they want to sell well, then they have to have good product reviews. Right? Along with this, we have our policies. The first of which we introduced in the Philippines is our easy returns policy. 7 days, 15 days, you can return. And then the return cost is handled by Lazada for free. So we have policies that are designed to ensure that customers and sellers have a trusted, reliable, and fair platform. These can all be found in our help center. And there are also videos there with regard to selling that MSMEs can check out. We also have a YouTube channel so that they can learn more about how to sell on Lazada. So these are our various policies: non-compliance, seller account policy, Lazada community policies, order management, intellectual property rights, fair trading, LazMall. So these cover a wide range of items to ensure that sellers and also buyers behave accordingly on the platform. With regard to buyer and seller protection, we have robust AI to ensure this. We have several risk domains, so we employ best-in-class technology approaches to protect buyers and sellers. So we have seller fraud, buyer fraud, prohibited goods, IPP. So the approach there with regard to seller fraud, their seller risk scoring, we deactivate their accounts, we can hold out their payouts, blacklist them. We have a seller penalty point system. With regard to buyer fraud, there's also buyer risk scoring, malicious registration prevention, account deactivation, and blacklisting. Also a buyer penalty point system. With regard to prohibited goods, we have an AI to detect and deactivate prohibited product names, descriptions, images. And then with regard to intellectual property protection, we have a platform for IP owners and brands to report infringement and counterfeit issues. Then we have AI to detect and block misuse of brand names and logos. Which brings me to our IPP portal, which was quote unquote lent to us by Alibaba. So we enable intellectual property protection through the IPP platform. So this is how it works. First, IP owners and brands can access the IP platform. You can read about latest news. You can initiate and manage IPR complaints and learn about protection. Now, this is the process. This is a one-stop platform also within Lazada. You can register as a platform IP owner or a brand. And then you submit your proof of your being the IP owner. Then you can initiate complaints on counterfeit, piracy, unfair use. And the internal team will review it. Will review the complaint, the supporting documents. You also give an opportunity for the seller to appeal. Then the result is that the complaint may be approved or rejected. Right? So that is how we protect the intellectual property rights of brands on Lazada. Of course, that doesn't preclude law firms from sending demand letters to us, which we also answer, of course, because some may not be as tech savvy and would rather do it through demand letter, of course, so that they have proof of notice, right? So to cap that off, we have these key takeaways, which I mentioned earlier. MSMEs are the backbone of a vibrant and growing internet economy. E-commerce platforms like Lazada, we enable MSMEs with tools, resources, market access that only big businesses used to have. And e-commerce platforms such as Lazada are highly beneficial to consumers in terms of assortment, price, convenience, and protection. And we feel really that the growth of the internet economy is a joint effort between private enterprise and government. So Lazada and e-commerce will continue to evolve in the new normal. We will adapt. We'll respond rapidly to changes in consumer needs, as I showed earlier. We will thrive. We'll focus on business continuity and support MSME growth in the Philippines. And we will lead and support and engage the community. Thank you, everyone, for spending your Friday afternoons with me. It's been an honor to be presenting on behalf of Lazada. I hope I did not bore you. And I think there are questions that I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chico. Your discussion on the IP protection, IP property platform is the perfect segue to the discussion that Susan will present on the toolbox that we would all need as we shift to the digital platform. Our third speaker, Susan Villanueva, is an experienced and accomplished litigator who has successfully represented intellectual property, tax, and trade cases. She heads our firm's IP department and is the principal litigator of IP litigation and enforcement cases. She was the principal litigator of landmark intellectual property cases in the Philippines, where the Supreme Court first declared a trademark as internationally well-known and affirmed the jurisdiction of the Intellectual Property Office over administrative cases for violations of intellectual property rights. She also successfully defended before the Supreme Court search warrants issued against suspected infringers in an enforcement action for the liquefied petroleum gasoline industry. She successfully argued before the Supreme Court to affirm the abandonment of a patent on the ground of public interest. She earned her Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of the Philippines College of Law in 1991, graduating cum laude and salutatorian. She earned her Master of Laws degree, specializing in intellectual property and international laws from Yale University in 1995. She was admitted to the New York State Bar in 1999. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome my partner, Susan Villanueva. You are on mute, Susan?
Yes, I have unmuted myself. That's the catchphrase for this year. You're on mute. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And as the practicing lawyer, the only practicing lawyer in this panel, I've been asked to discuss and to flag the possible legal issues that would confront businesses when they transition to e-commerce. Edwin is smart to, and Chico is smart, are smart to now just join the business world and to hire lawyers like me. Chico, by the way, was my former student. So now he tells me what to do. No, Chico, he reminds me of deadlines that I have to do legal work for him as well. So let me share my screen and that's it. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to discuss or to flag the legal issues that businesses would face when they transition to e-commerce. Now, the transition to e-commerce is really, an outcome of the fact that, let me just, okay, sorry, let me just, okay. Now, why do businesses have to transition to e-commerce? Initially, the transition to e-commerce is brought about by the need to also optimize business processes because of the availability of technology. Now, e-commerce, transition to e-commerce is beneficial to any business because it allows businesses to thrive. And e-commerce expands markets and increases competitiveness and value. And in the Philippines, sorry. In the Philippines, it's primed to be a internet market because of the fact that the Philippines really tops internet and social media use globally. According to a 2019 report, 76 million Filipinos are active social media users, and Filipinos top the world in terms of spending the most time online. And we average about 10 hours a day, while the worldwide average is 6 hours and 42 minutes. So we are well past the average. The Philippines also tops the world in terms of internet usage in front of a desktop or a laptop because the average time in front of a desktop or a laptop is about 5 hours, 4 minutes, while the worldwide average is 3 hours and 28 minutes. With respect to social media penetration, with 99% of internet users on at least one type of social media platform. And the dominant social media platform in the Philippines is actually Facebook. Of course, this may include all the fake accounts, but nonetheless, it's a huge amount. Based on the study, it's about 75 million Filipinos who are active in Facebook. And all this despite an internet speed of only 19 Mbps when the average is 54.3 Mbps. Okay. So transitioning to e-commerce now is no longer just a want of a business because of the availability of technology. E-commerce is now becoming an urgent need, especially in light of the COVID crisis. With the COVID crisis, it is now very critical that businesses have to adapt in order to ensure the survival of the survival of the businesses. Now, the need to adapt is also really critical for survival because, after all, evolution has taught us one valuable lesson, that it is not the strongest of species that survive, nor the most intelligent, it is the one most adaptable to change. So that's why it's critical for businesses to now evolve to e-commerce. Now, however, businesses that transition to e-commerce face legal issues, and all businesses must be aware of the legal challenges and risks that will be faced during the transition. And businesses need legal advice to avoid problems such as being mired in the most unproductive of all activities, which is litigation. And oftentimes, businesses consult lawyers only when a problem has already arisen and it needs to be solved. But much of these problems could have been avoided had they consulted with legal counsel. And if they had been advised accordingly, they would have managed or avoided the exposure that they would face if they had not considered the regulatory environment and the rules and regulations in place. So what are the key legal issues I think that businesses usually face when they transition to e-commerce? Well, this would be with respect to trademark, copyright issues, data privacy issues, consumer protection issues, and of course, contract issues. Now, for trademarks, in the Philippines, it is critical, or for any e-commerce really in the Philippines, it's critical that you protect your trademark. A trademark is so essential to the success of a business, especially in a very crowded marketplace. And in the Philippines, there are maybe 4 things that you have to keep in mind when you're trying to choose your trademark and how to protect your trademark. The first is that the Philippines adopts the first to file rule. So it's very critical that once you've decided on a trademark or a trade name to be used or a service mark to be used in the Philippines, that you file the same with the Intellectual Property Office. Now, before you do the, under the Philippines, an application on earliest filing date can prevent the filing of a subsequently filed application with the same or similar mark. So it's critical that you attend to the registration as soon as possible. And it's also good practice to search the online database of the Intellectual Property Office. And I think, you know, the IPO in the IPO is very good with respect to utilizing the internet in providing information on the protection of IP. They have an online database, and you can be able to access this database. It's good to search first whether the trademark that you want to use has already been registered or is the subject of an application. Because if you try to register a trademark that has already been applied for, it will not be granted. So it's a good idea and a good practice to always search the online database. Now, with respect to trade names, keep in mind that in the Philippines, trade names are also protected whether they are registered or not. So aside from doing the search on the online database, it's also critical for businesses to also do a search with respect to trade names. Under Philippine law, trade names are protected, and they are even protected against the use by third parties as trade names. So trade names, whether they're protected or not, are protected, and trade name owners can enforce their rights even as against a person has used the same as a trademark subsequently. Now, it's also good to know when you're doing when you're deciding what trademark to use, it's good to know what the rules with respect to what may be registered and what may not be registered, especially since the rules have changed with respect to what may be protected. So as a general rule, I think the general rule is it is best to choose a trademark that's a coined mark or arbitrary mark or a suggestive mark, because these are entitled to greater protection and would not have any problems with respect to registration. Now, descriptive and generic marks would be problematic because these are generally not allowed registration. And it's also critical to note that under the new Philippine Intellectual Property Code, generic marks, which under the old law, Republic Act 166, could be registered if they have acquired secondary meaning or if they've been used for at least 5 years. Continuously and exclusively in commerce, they can no longer be registered under the IP code. Only descriptive marks can be registered. So this is something that you must know so that you can choose a trademark that would be entitled to the greatest to protection and could easily be registered without encountering any problems. Now, it's also important, I think, that your trademark or service mark should be your second level domain name, and because the domain name creates the business's unique identity online. It is very critical that you must be searchable in the web, so you need to register your trademark as your domain name to make it easy for customers to find your business. It helps a business create a professional look, it increases brand awareness and builds credibility, and of course it also is protecting your trademark and your copyright. Now, in case your domain name is not your trademark or service mark, it's best practice to require that it should be easy to type and pronounce. You should avoid hyphens and numbers, short and simple, and must not be similar to existing brands. It's also good practice to register your domain name if it is not your trademark as a service mark in the Philippines in order to avail of the legal remedies under the Intellectual Property Code. And of course, with respect to trademarks, it's also critical that when you choose your trademark, you must do that search in order that you will not use trademarks that are owned by other companies, because otherwise you face reputational risks or you face litigation on the grounds of infringement or unfair competition. Okay. With respect to copyright issues, these are critical to any business transitioning to e-commerce. Why? Because it is essential for the business to own its own intellectual property. Now, if a business is engaged the services of a web developer, you must ensure that you own any IP to the contents of the website. Make sure there is an assignment of copyright in your favor. Why? Because under the IP code, if a work is commissioned, the copyright is actually retained by the person who commissioned the work, unless there is an agreement to the contrary. So without an assignment of copyright, the copyright will be retained by the web developer. So I think it's critical that you have to ensure that the business will own all the IP with respect to the website, for example. You have to avoid as well using copyrighted materials in your website, because this will expose your business to the liability for copyright infringement. And under Philippine law, a copyright infringer, regardless of whether the use is commercial or not, is liable civilly, administratively, and criminally. And of course, when you have copyright, you need to enforce it, including enforce your trademarks. And it's very critical because IP is a private rights system, and you need to enforce it. And with respect to copyright under the IP code, the rule actually in the Philippines is that copyright exists or vests from the very moment of creation. So registration and deposit is not necessary in order to enforce copyright. However, having a certificate of registration and deposit from the National Library would facilitate transactions with third parties, because most people cannot believe that any person would have rights without a government certificate validating such right. And of course, even for enforcement issues, it is easier for you to enforce your IP, especially when you send demand letters to other businesses who may be infringing your rights, if you have that official looking certificate. Okay, so with respect to data privacy, the Philippines has a law, Republic Act 10173, which took effect on September 8, 2012. Now, privacy is a major issue that can create problems for both business and customers in an online environment. And customers share their personal information with online businesses, and they expect their information to be kept confidential and safeguarded. If a mistake is made and customer information is leaked, the business will not only lose potential customers, but the business will also suffer reputational damage and exposed to liabilities under the law. So it is critical to have a well-written and comprehensive privacy policy. Now, the privacy policy establishes the nature and discourse of personal information that is entered on your e-commerce platform. When a user makes an online purchase, they are required to enter confidential information. Under the law, their consent to the extent and purpose of the collection and processing of their data is generally needed prior to its collection, and such consent is required to be recorded. A privacy policy of the business would specify the procedure for collection, obtaining consent, limits on the processing, ensure restricted access to such information, and retention policies. It is the business's responsibility to ensure that personal information is secured and that any user can go. Now, under our law, there is a mandatory registration of data processing systems if the business employs at least 250 employees, or include sensitive information of about 1,000 individuals or poses a risk to the rights and freedom of the subjects, and the processing is not occasional. However, the NTC has issued a circular that mandatorily requires certain businesses to register their data processing systems. It should include financial institutions, telecommunication networks, BPOs, schools, hospitals, insurance providers, direct marketing and networking business, and pharma companies engaged in research. The law also requires the appointment of a data protection officer to ensure compliance with data privacy policy. And this law, the Data Privacy Act, imposes administrative, civil, and criminal penalties for breach of data privacy. So it is critical that this would be taken into account when you transition to e-commerce. Another legal issue that a business would be exposed to would be consumer protection. Now, if the business fails to provide clear and complete description of the product, costs and purchase details, and information about delivery, when the customer will receive the products and other information related to exchange and refunds, penalties can be imposed on your business. Republic Act 8792 or the Electronic Commerce Act penalizes any violations of the Consumer Act done online. The penalty imposed is the same as that provided under the Consumer Act. So under Section 50 of the Consumer Act, deceptive sales acts, for example, are penalized with a fine of not less than 500 pesos, but not more than 10,000 pesos, or imprisonment of at least 5 months, but not more than 1 year or both, at the discretion of the court. So there is liability, and the liability is criminal. Now, according to a research, the impact of dissatisfied customers actually adversely affects the business. And the range of potential loss would be 11% of business for those involved in grocery items, but up to a loss of 25% for mass retailers. Okay, and the last, issue that I will flag, the legal issue I will flag that would face businesses that transition to e-commerce would be contract issues. Creating enforceable online contracts would be critical, and these are important in resolving legal issues. For example, the terms and conditions of the online contract should set the rules for all online transactions. At a minimum, this rule should focus on liability limits, return policies, delivery conditions, and other consumer-focused rules. Generally, terms and conditions are there to protect the business and establish a procedure in the event of a legal dispute. It's important these are well-defined and clearly stated in order to minimize legal disputes. So it's very critical that the contract issues would be assessed and the risk would be managed. So for example, what would be some of the usual contract issues? Delivery would be a major issue, and your business should provide a reasonable delivery schedule, and you need to follow through on that promise. And if you cannot deliver due to cost to issues that are beyond your control, it is important that you have a notification system, for example. It's also very critical for the business to have a clear billing policy, and to make sure that one of the I think important things to keep in mind when you transition to e-commerce is that you have to make sure that your trade name appears on your account's billing descriptor. Oftentimes, the name that appears in the billing descriptor is different. It would be your corporate name, but not your trademark or your trade name. And when customers review their statements, they would usually, their first instinct would be to question a transaction under a name that they're not familiar with. So it's a good practice to always ensure that your account, your trademark or your trade name is clearly indicated in your billing descriptor. And it's also critical to provide a clear and simple return or exchange policy where the terms and procedures are explained. And of course, it's also critical, I think, for contract issues in order to resolve disputes, that you must have a system where customers and clients could easily contact the business for any problems with respect to the contract or the sale. And other contract issues would also be with respect to when you establish a business and you have and the business is with other partners. It is best practice to have a shareholders agreement that would clearly define the rights and responsibilities of the parties, because this will avoid any dispute with respect to what their rights are and what their responsibilities are. So these would be the legal issues that businesses transitioning to e-commerce would face when they do decide and when they're impelled by the environment to transition to e-commerce. So I would be very pleased to respond to any of the questions in the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Susan, for providing a very clear roadmap. And the audience is now invited to ask questions by posting them in the Q&A box. A number of them have come in already, and I see that Edwin has very kindly answered a number already through the Q&A box, and the audience is invited to read through his answers. So I will start by asking questions that have been posed that have not yet been answered in that box. One such question is addressed to Chico, and it's: considering that regulations tend to lag behind development in technology, such as possible misunderstandings regarding the characterization of an online marketplace as a platform rather than a store, hence subject to retail laws, would you say that lobbying is important to the business of Lazada? Are there efforts from Lazada or industry alliances to increase awareness and improve the understanding of our lawmakers and regulators?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you for that question from an anonymous viewer. We have participated in the deliberations of these bills. We will continue to collaborate and cooperate with the executive and legislative branch and provide our insights, of course, to craft a law or laws that would equitably protect consumers, sellers, MSMEs, and of course, platforms. So in the course of our participation, we will provide our insights on how the e-commerce platforms operate, and that's the direction we are taking. We are invited as resource speakers, and we provide our insights accordingly. With regard to other industry players and how they do it, I've seen them being invited also in the committee hearings, in the technical working groups. So with regard to their stance, I don't think I can speak on behalf of them.
Another question for you, Chico. Alibaba is a majority stockholder in Lazada. The Trump administration has been tightening the noose on Chinese companies like Huawei, TikTok, and so on. If ever Alibaba comes into the crosshairs of the Trump administration, or though unlikely to be total in scope, if there would be a decoupling of the US and China economies, how would this affect Lazada?
I don't think I'll be in any capacity to answer that question. I can just answer that Lazada is a Southeast Asian business. It is incorporated here in the Philippines. It is operating in several ventures. So with regard to how US and China trade relations might affect us, I don't think as a lawyer I will have any personal knowledge, or even if I have any expert capacity to answer with regard to that. Interesting question though.
This could be answered by any of our speakers. The requirements of the e-commerce law on electronic signatures are stringent. What alternatives can you recommend in terms of documenting consent to ensure that contracts where you cannot get wet signatures are still valid and binding?
Let me answer. We in our case, it's really difficult. But let me just speak about our experience with our U.S. investors. We have, they are more progressive. Perhaps I would address this to a attendee here who's a member, who's representing the House of Congress. We in the United States, we have this. We sign a lot of documentations, and obviously we cannot deal with them on a. We deal quite real time. So what we do is we exchange emails, and alongside there are a number of modern electronic tools for signatures. There's what they call the Hello Sign signature, which they allow you to do e-signatures, and I understand that there's our e-commerce act is quite restrictive on that point, but since we sign it knowingly, then we bind ourselves to our voluntary signature. It's very, very difficult right now to require a lot of wet signatures right now. We understand from financial institutions, they require that. And for certain, but however, for certain matters, we felt that if we can get the consent of the other party and they assent to the consent, giving their voluntary consent, then we use that as a basis for us to conclude our business. It's very, very difficult right now if you require wet signatures, to be perfectly honest. We deal with financial institutions. I think they still maintain wet signatures. We continue to lobby with them on that point. No? And with us also maybe perhaps the Banco Central can be more open with being open with allowing other than wet signatures. It's really very constricting right now if you just require purely wet signatures. That's why we really ask for the consent of the other party, and we take note of it by email, showing their consent to us. But of course, we are working under those restrictions, but we find ways to make sure that how do we facilitate a faster means of giving consent. It's all a matter of giving consent. You're consented. So, but that again, that's how we work around those difficulties, and that's how we do it, at least in the Philippine setting. But with respect to our U.S. investors, our U.S. partners, we allow e-signatures, and we gladly do it because there are protections. By the way, the tools there are ample protections. Your e-signature can only be used once, and they will secure your consent if you're going to use another e-signature. So there are a number of protections, which I think we're very, very, we have to open ourselves up to e-signatures and providing the ample protections that go along with e-signatures. If you establish those ample protections, then maybe perhaps our Congress or our other institutions will be more open other than wet signatures.
And from a litigation perspective, the failure to comply with the wet signature only removes the presumption of enforceability and feasibility. You can still prove consent in other ways. So the only consequence really legally is that it removes the presumption. But nonetheless, you can still present other evidence of consent.
Thanks. The next one is for Chico. What are the usual customer relations problems being faced by Lazada, and how do you respond? How quickly do you respond to address angry customers?
Thank you for that question. So the average resolution time of a customer contact on Lazada is about 24 hours. So the customer contact ranges from where is my order, which is the #1 customer contact, to, of course, return of goods. So how do we resolve that? That is through our BPO team. With regard to angry customers, there are always irate customers. Our BPO team has hopefully been trained very well with regard to that. And some are escalated to me, and we, of course, treat them accordingly. So I think we pride ourselves on the resolution time of 24 hours. And then the escalation to the DTI of complaints from Lazada is at 0.001%. So I think that bodes well with regard to how we resolve our customer complaints, customer contacts.
Thank you. The next question is for Edwin. Since he mentioned M. Louvillier earlier, do you have an exclusivity clause? And if none, how can you help our company with regard to PayMongo? It's a question from somebody from Cebuana, Louvillier.
We integrate through the over the counter through coins.ph. We tried to, I'm not sure if it's Cebuana or M. Louvillier. We tried to work directly with them, but there were certain fees that I must ask for your apology whether it was Cebuana or M. Louvillier, but one of them required a payment fee to integrate with them, which we found quite exorbitant considering that most of the other financial partners like GCash would not require any integration fees, integration payments. The reason why you don't charge for integration fees is you want your commerce to expand. You want to expand. So imposing integration fee is a barrier to integration. Whereas, for instance, GCash, when we integrated with GCash, we did it with our developers and working with their developers, just using the API documentation. And that's why integration is faster. The lesser that you have barriers to integration, the better for us. And in answer to that, we are willing to work with any financial partners. If Cebuana Louvillier would like to integrate with us, we'd be happy to do that. We are very, very competent developers and we provide actually API documentations for that. So we're just waiting. We keep on talking to financial partners to expand our different payment methods. That's why we've spoken to Palawan Express. We've spoken to a number of over-the-counter payment processes. We try to put online the offline payment methods. So I think that's the way to increase digital payments, encouraging them to migrate also in terms of payments, to migrate away from cash. I think Bangko Sentral used to have this, when I was still with government, I think Governor Saito Tanco had this vision of 20 by 2020, 20% cashless by year 2020. I think we're closer to 20%, but I think there's the Governor Diokto continues that policy, which is very, very commendable. So as we move to cashless transactions, I think the burden on government is to really remove barriers to integration. So making it as facilitating the ease of use, ease of integration, ease of, and that would require also, with the exception of consumer protection rules, making rules easier for people to transact online and also to migrate online.
Thank you. The next question, what are possible legal issues when setting up e-wallets?
I think the basic one is you have to, I think your law firm should be able to answer that, but I see Rosa should be able to answer. Basically, the license to secure an e-wallet or basically an e-money license is 100 million. You're required to put up 100 million in capitalization to set up a e-money license. You have to have an e-money license before you set up an e-wallet. So that's a basic hurdle plus a number of Bangko Sentral requirements that you would have to present to them. So, but the basic for e-wallet is 100. But I think there's a Bangko Sentral representative attending. What the burden right now for e-wallets is this. To transact on e-wallet, there's a limit of 100,000 pesos. I think the rules of the Bangko Sentral were previously made imposing a limit of 100,000 pesos because at that time there were only very few, the penetration of e-wallets wasn't that much. But right now you've got e-wallets like GCash, PayMaya, then GrabPay is here, then WeChat, Alipay are also, UnionPay is here. So a lot of these e-wallets are growing and sprouting. And I would urge the Bangko Sentral to increase the limit of transactions because you can only transact to as high as 100,000 pesos. I think that's pretty outdated. I think you need to expand it so to encourage more digital payments. At 100,000, I think if someone wants to buy from Lazada, 100,000 may not be enough, especially for a 99 promo. So I think Bangko Sentral might want to revisit this limit on e-wallet transactions.
Okay, this is a very interesting question. Do you think trust in e-commerce and fintech has been affected by the Wirecard incident, especially since there are Philippine ties to the controversy?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the one that was affected was directly were Citibank merchants. I know because Wirecard purchased or acquired the acquiring business of Citibank. So a lot of Wirecard merchants, Wirecard is an acquiring. It handles the processing of payments. So a lot of Citibank merchants migrated to Wirecard, but there's really no effect here on the Philippines because all the allegations of money laundering here in the Philippines were found to be not true. But because of the global reputation of Wirecard, it also affected Wirecard. And I understand Wirecard is in the process of selling their assets. And that's what I heard. I may be wrong, but in and of itself, Wirecard here in the Philippines is only an acquiring business. There are many acquiring businesses here. Union Bank, there are about 5 acquiring. Paymaya is acquiring. So there's really too many. There's really enough acquiring businesses that shouldn't affect. But in terms of trust, no. Also, I think Lazada should be able to prove that. Otherwise, Lazada should have seen a drop in e-commerce. No, but I don't think Wirecard in and of itself should affect. It never affected the retail ones. It's more of the acquiring side. But Chucky here would be able to answer that.
Okay.
Chico, sorry,
Yes.
Chico.
I think I can answer that indirectly. The e-commerce growth in the Philippines is still on a very good trajectory. It's projected at 39% annual. Some e-commerce companies report triple-digit growth. So I think that bodes well for how the internet economy will is set up for the future.
Okay. This is related to the earlier question on wet signatures. With requirements of the notarial law requiring the parties to sign before the notary, is there a workaround from wet signatures?
Well, there's online
The-
notarization now, right? The Supreme Court just issued rules allowing video conferences in order to notarize documents.
The next question is to you again, Susan. We understand we should register our brands. Is it expensive to register a trademark, and how long is the registration process?
Okay, so there's for intellectual property, actually, maybe as a background, IT practitioners belong to an intellectual property organization called EPOP. And previously, prior to the competition law, EPOP had a scheduled fees, which would suggest to IP practitioners to offer a fixed fee schedule. And because of this fixed fee schedule, now it's no longer binding, but it's like a what the fees would be indicative or similar to the EPOP fees. It's really not expensive to register your trademarks. Most law firms, even the major ones, even Cruz Marcel and Teni Francia, we have a fixed fee schedule in order to register trademarks. And it does not matter how long it takes for us to do the registration papers. It's really fixed. The fee is fixed. And secondly, the IPO fees are not, well, the IPO charges based on the number of classes your goods or your services fall in, but it's not significant. So it's actually it's not exorbitant or expensive in order for businesses to register your trademarks. And then the long-term benefits of having registration outweigh the costs because the costs are actually manageable and predictable.
The next question is for Chico. How does Lazada handle Chinese cosmetic companies that compete with local Philippine cosmetic brands unfairly, given that some of these Chinese brands do not comply with local FDA product registration requirements. And in relation to this, if Lazada finds out that these companies do not have the necessary FDA registrations, will Lazada remove them from the platform?
Very good question. I think it ties back to how we ensure trust on our platform with regard to Lazada buyers and seller protection. We have AI to check this out. We have policies with regard to prohibited goods. If we ever find out that there are items that are flagged by the FDA, then we remove them accordingly and deactivate them. We have a seller penalty point system that will be meted out on the seller. And we have a variety of remedies also in order to deal with these kinds of matters. So we will remove items accordingly.
Okay. The next question is for Edwin. Knowing that there are a lot of e-wallet players out there, some of which are PayMongo partners, is it still viable to launch an e-wallet?
I mean, the more the merrier, but in terms of you as someone opening up an e-wallet, it might be you would have to weigh the costs. Like I mentioned, you start out with 100 million requirement from the Bangko Sentral, and then you have to put up the technology behind that. It might be difficult. Right now, the penetration rate of GCash is, I think GCash is growing fast. It's a #1 e-wallet company now. Paymaya is, if I'm not mistaken, prior to the pandemic, Paymaya was focused on promoting its QR code offline. So, but when the pandemic hit, there was a marked shift to online. That's why Paymaya is doing well also now in its e-wallet. But beyond that, GrabPay is just starting. So you've got the third one, GrabPay, and then you've got the possible influx of WeChat and Alipay. WeChat and Alipay are coming in only because of a lot of the Chinese population that we have from the mainland. But I think you really need to study it closely whether it's viable to set up another one. We have only a population of 110 million, but of the 110, only 68 million are online. Of the 68 million, you have to bring it down lower to a number of people who are really using e-wallet users. It's significantly lower. But I can tell you from our data in PayMongo, the use of GCash is huge, quite huge. But again, if you're going to set up an e-wallet, you might want to reconsider costs first. And also you need to do a study on the number of users right now. Because right now, GCash is really very aggressive. Paymaya is also just as aggressive. GrabPay, I think, is a bit trying to also be as aggressive. But unless you're tied up with a major financial partner like Alibaba, Tencent, or whatever huge fintech or venture capital firm out there willing to fund you, it might pose a challenge.
The next question is for Chico. Does Lazada protect rights of exclusive distributors against gray market sellers?
Thank you for the question. Of course, this can be raised in our IP portal. If the exclusive distributor also has the corresponding IP authorization, we can deal with this accordingly. This can be raised in the portal. Of course, they can also check their IP lawyer, and they will send a demand letter to us, and we will seek the help of attorney Susan to answer.
Okay, I think I've asked all the questions in the Q&A box. I will switch now to the chat where there are a few questions remaining. The next one is again for Chico. And I think he has addressed this in his answers relating to the IP portal. Does Lazada allow sale of fake goods? There are times you see in questions asking if goods are legitimate, then the answer is Class A. Would you care to comment on this, Chico?
Of course, they can raise these answers, and then we can deal with and investigate, of course, the sellers who answer this way.
Okay. The next one is for you again. You mentioned that Lazada is also PCI DSS compliant. Is this required of all online marketplace providers, even if the provider engages payment aggregators for payment processing?
I think Attorney Luciardo will be in better position to answer that, but it is my understanding that the PCI is mandated by card brands.
If you're processing credit card payments, it was a standard required by the credit card companies, Visa and Mastercard. So unless you're not dealing, if you're not dealing with credit cards, then there's no such requirement. But it's a brand that you would want to have, especially it's a requirement from the credit card companies. And by the way, we have annual audits to that, so it's really pretty expensive to maintain the PCI DSS compliance. And the audit is quite extensive. We just went through our annual audit. We just got our second certificate for PC. It's an annual audit, so it's unless you really want to process card payments, then there's as far as I know, there's no reason for you to secure a PCI DSS compliance.
Okay. Chico, the next question is for you. While Lazada is a selling/buying platform, is it also considered a payment processor? Is it also considered a retailer in terms of liability to consumers, business registration, tax, etc.?
Okay. Well, we registered under the National Payment Systems Act, so that answers the first question. With regard to being a retailer, we have a limited retail model. So there are some items on the platform wherein we own the goods and we sell the goods so we would be liable for those under the Consumer Act if there are any defects. And then taxes with regard to that. We are registered. We paid about how many million in business taxes to Taguig, and we remitted X million in VAT also to the BIR. So yes, we are a retailer in some aspect of our business.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next one is addressed to all the panelists. How robust are the data privacy protections for e-payment transactions? There is a sentiment that e-payments are a way for governments, companies, etc. to track people and their activities.
As a payment provider, I can give an example. Very recently, someone from the Portuguese police department requested from PayMongo details on payments from one particular card holder. And we issued an email responding to them that we cannot disclose unless there's a court order for us to disclose the details of the card holder. We observe strictly the data privacy rules. In fact, our data privacy laws are stipulated in our website. So, and that's a very important component, ensuring the trust and confidence of the online merchants. So the assurance that my data is my privacy is secure, my data is secure, and that it's not going to be shared recklessly or carelessly.
Yes, on our end, we have to ensure compliance with our data privacy law. And of course, part of the business model of a platform like Lazada is, of course, part of that is trust. We wouldn't be able to have online transactions if we didn't have trust as part of our business model.
Thank you. Chico, another one for you. Does Lazada have models that also support mall owners? If a mall owner wants to partner with Lazada to help its tenants, will the mall owner be considered the seller? Is there a way for the mall owner to maintain its status as a lessor instead of being deemed a seller?
Oh, very interesting question. Of course, there are many ways of going about this. If the mall owns the goods, then they will be considered as the seller, right? Of course, we can have a consignment agreement, and just to mention, SM is on Lazada, Robinson's Appliances is on Lazada as a seller, all of these big sellers. SNR is on Lazada, so they are treated as a seller. Now, with regard to their lessors, I think there can be a way for that arrangement to be made. We can check, of course, with our commercial team how that can be made, especially in time of COVID, that the lessor will become the mall will owner will just act as a conduit, as a platform of sorts, and then to onboard on another platform, which is Lazada. Of course, we can explore all of these opportunities there. And I think the best way would, of course, be for the lessors themselves to directly go to Lazada and sign up as a seller.
Okay. And a final question to both Edwin and Chico. What impact do you foresee once the Philippines becomes COVID-free?
Chico, you want to go ahead because you're earlier in the online space.
Very interesting and very interesting question. I hope the Philippines will become COVID-free. Of course, we all are hoping for that. And we foresee that the online space, Filipinos are ready for online buying. And we are on a good trajectory for growth. And with more and more people going business online, pivoting also online, the vast opportunities are there. Of course, I'm from Bukidnon. Just look at that. I'm from Bukidnon. I could never buy a Levi's pair of jeans if I'm in Bukidnon. There is no mall in my place. There's not even a restaurant in my place. But only through platforms can we have consumers from all over the Philippines have access to goods and at very competitive prices. So I foresee that even without COVID, the future looks bright for e-commerce in this country. The internet retail is still just, according to some studies, at 4% of total retail in the Philippines. So the huge potential for growth is at 96% of total retail. In other countries, it's just 10%, 15%, right? Well, there's still a big chunk doing offline retail. Online retail is huge potential for growth. So COVID, without COVID, I think it will be a bright future. And of course, I'm always hoping that we'll be COVID-free soon.
In our case, just to give you some observations, when they lifted the lockdown, we were anticipating a return to a lower payments processing. It never happened. And right now, as we loosen our restrictions, we've not seen a lowering of our payments processing. That indicates one thing, that there's a growing adoption of online payments, meaning there's a growing adoption of online commerce. So I think the trust actually and the confidence were aided not only by Lazada, but were to a large degree forced upon them by COVID as an inflection point. People were just forced to migrate online and transact online. And that became in the word that is very, very, very conveniently used right now, the new normal. Do we see a return to a decline of online payments processing? I think they've adopted to the new attitude, and I think Chico is right here, and I would defer to Chico's expertise here. But anecdotally also, we've seen the growing growth in payments. And by the way, payments is really a temperature, because that's the foundation of any online commerce is really getting paid. So if we see payments growing, that means online commerce is growing. And also in that Google Temasek report that I've referenced to, in that particular report, they see the Philippines as having the most growth in the Southeast Asian region. So do we see a going back? No, I think it's going to grow. I think the trust has increased further. So I see a growing explosion. And by the way, I'm going to tell Chico this, that expect a number of competing marketplaces to Lazada. That shows you the potential for growth, because we've been in talks with some who are looking at being competitors to Lazada. So that indicates the need. By the way, also a growing realization that we need to protect ourselves. What if another pandemic happens? And the only way that they see being insulated from any pandemic is the online space, barring our internet lines being destroyed underwater. But barring that, we see only growth in online commerce. Maybe perhaps the one that will be affected will be online travel. But for online commerce, for the rest, I think the growth will be substantial. So we see a very optimistic view on the growth of the online commerce, of the digital economy, actually.
Despite the late hour, questions are still coming in. Chico, for you, regarding cross-border transactions from China, how do they pay VAT? You're on mute.
Yes, I believe there's under our NIRC, there's a VAT on importation and there are customs duties. So the way we do it is to be frictionless for the consumers, is that the prices and the tax are all embedded in your final purchase price. So that's how it's done. So instead of like if you buy from other platforms, right, you have to go to customs sometimes and then settle your customs duties. So, and of course we have the de minimis thresholds and all of these things. So most of these goods are under the de minimis thresholds, I would believe.
And for both you and Edwin, in terms of regulations relating to e-commerce, what is a low-hanging fruit that you or your company would wish to be eased or lifted?
For us right now, there's a potential problem for online payments, and this is the EVAT on online payments, because we're a pass-through. Payment providers are just a pass-through. If you're going to impose another EVAT on that, that will be a burdensome on the part of online commerce, at least on the online bars. As you know, VAT will be passed on. So that may pose as a deterrent to online commerce, at least for payments, because that will mean paying more for the same value. Right now, there's no EVAT for payment for service providers like payment providers. So if it's imposed if the EVAT is imposed on the digital payments, that might present a problem for online commerce.
Very good question also. I think I will circle back to how the e-commerce platform operates. That MSMEs are really the key for platforms. Without the MSMEs, there will be no e-commerce on Lazada, right? So I think the low-hanging fruit there would be on the ease of doing business side. If we can help MSMEs shorten the amount of time that they register to comply with registration requirements, and then have a digital infrastructure even for registration of businesses, that would be very, very helpful, right? So that they can pivot immediately or very fast to the digital economy.
Just a small trivia lang on the there's been a huge increase in registration of sole proprietorships. Last year, I think it was about 66,000 registration of sole proprietorships. It has already been reached this year. The DTI has accepted more than 66,000 applications for sole proprietorship. That means people are really migrating online. I think the announcement that individuals should register as sole proprietorships have forced a lot of individuals to really register themselves. I think the era of there was one question a while ago about e-commerce. I think it's difficult for in online to be an underground economy. If you want, there are a lot of online merchants who don't issue receipts, but the inevitability that if you go online, you will stop at some point being an underground economy. You just have to be prepared to really just register and pay your taxes. I mean, that's a small return on the part of citizens to contribute to the national coffers. But it's not going to be like as simple as an underground economy where you sell in Divisoria and you don't get taxed for that. But at some point, because there's a paper trail on the digital space, you're bound to be taxed at some point. So you'd encourage a lot of them. And by the way, Chico is correct. Government has been very, very supportive of the ease of doing business. They've made rules in SEC and DTI. They have made registration a lot faster. You've got OPC in terms of corporations. You've got processing is faster now on DTI. It's all online. So I think Chico, I agree with Chico, for as long as you continue making business easy to register, easy to facilitate, then I think the growth in the digital space would be more accelerated.
Okay. There's one more question in the chat box. How do you think this e-commerce era impacts the small retailers and even consumers who do not have access to capable technologies? How can you encourage or help them transition to digital transactions / payments? Do you think our poor internet connection plays a big role in this?
Chico.
Of course, well, internet connectivity is one of the key things that we said earlier from Lazada's point of view that we need to work on, right? For e-commerce to grow. But even without, as Attorney Villanueva mentioned, even with the minimal speeds that we have, we're still at this trajectory. So imagine if we increase the speed of internet connectivity, what will the trajectory be, right, for internet commerce? And then with regard to encouraging them to transition to digital transactions, for Lazada, they can it's easy onboarding. The challenge there may be on the logistics front where the seller is. If there is a logistics partner of Lazada who can pick up the goods from them, that's quite a challenge also. That's why we also want to work with the government on how the logistics capabilities, logistics infrastructure of the country can be improved, right? So that the far reaches of the country where sellers are, they can be serviced also by platforms such as Lazada and all the other kinds of platforms.
On our end, I'll do a little bit of promotion on the internet connectivity. I think President Duterte's threat really helped. No, I think Senate has. I think Senator Drilon has made this particular amendment where the permits for setting up a tower is limited. Is good for 3 years, or it will make setting up of towers much easier. That's a complaint of both telcos. No? I think that's one, and the push for faster connectivity is an important component on that point. But away from governmental interventions, like I said, payments is a foundational thing. So what we've done is really, PayMongo was designed to really make payments easier for online merchants. So you can sell in Facebook. I mean, if a small retailer wants to sell anywhere, you don't have to set up a website. So you just offer to pay up, set up one on Facebook or Instagram. Or in Indonesia or in India, for instance, e-commerce is being done in one of the social chat groups. So, but again, payments, we have a PayMongo links where you don't have to have a website. You just send the link, and then you can immediately accept payments. And that's one way. That's why you don't need to set up a website for that. So that's one. That's where. And then you have other plugins like Shopify plugins where you can just set it up and don't need to pay. I mean, if you can afford the services of Lazada, and they're not very expensive anyway, so you can go and register with Lazada. I think a lot of the marketplaces are making it easier for merchants to migrate online, and it's also inevitable for them to grow online also. If big merchants are doing it, there's no reason for small ones. And I think also as a trivia, the online sellers, the small online sellers who are doing very well are those who are selling Korean cosmetics, by the way, on Facebook, on Instagram. They're selling even without the benefit of PayMongo. And yet we've seen a number of them migrating to PayMongo because of the links. But again, the creativity of Filipinos, they'll sell anywhere if there's a space to do that. And I think we just like to encourage anyone who wants to sell. It's not difficult to sell. Sell on Facebook, sell on Instagram, sell on Lazada, and Paymongo will be there if we have the links to provide that. You don't have to have a website to receive payments. That's why our mission is really to help the small and medium enterprises. That's why we're agnostic in payment. We don't care whether you're small, medium, or large. It's there to help you go online and do. We grow as you grow. That's our motto.
Here's an interesting one. Are online marketplaces such as Lazada also considered engaged in mass media? The SEC has previously opined that an online platform may be deemed engaged in a mass media activity if there is a pervasive or indiscriminate display of promotional materials or advertisements intending to increase the sale of products in such a platform. Would appreciate your thoughts on this.
Quite interesting question, really. The SEC, I think, has issued numerous opinions with regard to the online space and what is and what isn't considered mass media. And I don't think I'm in any position to say that our platform is mass media or not.
I'll defer to Susan.
Let's await litigation instead of discussing it publicly.
Okay. I think I have asked all the questions in both the Q&A box and the chat box, and it is getting late. We are past the 2 hours allotted to us, and I think I will have to close the formal part of the program. And thank you all very, very much. Thank you to Edwin Lacerda. Thank you to Chico Castro. Thank you, Susan Villanueva. And to our host, Legal 500, for this very productive afternoon. I hope that the audience has benefited from the discussion. And although we are closing the formal part of the program, I think that those who want to stay on and chat with us, spend the rest of your Friday afternoon saying hello. I think we can stay on the Zoom platform just to say hi and check on each other after all these days in lockdown. So with that, thank you again and hope to see you all in person very soon.
I should say, so people in the audience, I don't think can turn the cameras on. If you would like to have an gathering, you can raise your hand through the Zoom platform and I'll bring you into the speakers room so that you can talk to us all. There's no other way of doing it.
Okay, so they need to raise their hands for you to bring them in. All right.
Camera now and have a discussion. Please raise your hand through the chat box and I'll invite you into the room. Here we are, we have hands coming up.
Okay, thank you.
While I am doing this, I will just say a very quick thank you. Thanks, of course, to Edwin and Chico, if I may. Really appreciate you taking the time. Sorry we pushed you so hard and made you answer so many questions, but thank you very much. Thanks, of course, to Cruz Marcela and Tena Francia. Fantastic to hear your views. Thank you to Susan, and thanks also to Patricia for moderating so well. Really appreciate it. If I can just say briefly, finally, Patricia, to the GCs in the audience, we have had a lot of people ask about the GC Power List. I should say we are planning to launch this in May, so 18th to the 21st of May. Legal 500 will have its Southeast Asia Week. That's the Legal 500 Award, Southeast Asia, of course, Cruz Marcela and Tena Francia will be now thinking that, but we also have the GC Power List launching, so do please get in touch about that. And we'd be happy to talk to you. So like I say, if you want to join us in the chat room, please raise your hand. I can see a few people have joined already. Feel free to turn your microphones on and speak to us.
By the way, I'd like to thank Attorney Villanueva, Attorney Bunye, for the invitation. It's been an honor to be invited for this. Thank you also to Attorney Lacerda. It's quite an honor to be in the same Zoom room with former spokesperson of a president, and went incubator also. That's quite an impressive feat. I know what it is to be under Series A, Series B, Series D funding. During the early days of Lazada, I encountered that kind of scrutiny also. Before
Thank you
the
also. Thank you very much, Chico. I learned a lot also from Lazada. Thank you also,
So that-
Patricia, Susan, and to the Cruz Marcelo Tenefrancia Law Firm for inviting me to, and also to James from Legal 500 for facilitating this discussion today. Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you also.